Yesterday's prophecies, today's headlines. This is the Hal Lindsey Report. And now, Hal Lindsey.
Good evening and welcome to this edition of the Hal Lindsey Report. A few days ago on Face the Nation, host Bob Schiffer interviewed Madeleine Albright, former Secretary of State under Bill Clinton. In his first question, he asked, "Can you recall a time when there was so much trouble in so many different places around the world?" They discussed a variety of hot spots, including Gaza, Russia, Ukraine, Libya, where the U.S. had to evacuate its embassy last week, and Syria, which Schiffer characterized as just a slaughterhouse, apparently. He said, "It's almost like we're caught up in events out of control." Albright gave an answer everyone can understand. To put it mildly, she said, "The world is a mess." Jesus likened the world near the end of the church age to a woman in labor. Contractions come and go, but with each one getting stronger and coming closer together. Last week, President Barack Obama went on a fundraising tour of the West. He did something you rarely hear a president do at a fundraiser. He said something important. He spoke of an anxiety hanging over the people of the world and explained it like this. Part of people's concern is just the sense that around the world, the old order isn't holding, and we're not quite yet where we need to be in terms of a new order that's based on a different set of principles. I think that sums it up. The old order isn't holding. People feel the old foundations crumbling beneath their feet. Something new is coming, a new order based on a different set of principles. That's also what the Bible predicts. In fact, it's amazing how much the Bible has to say about the time which we're living. You may be new to Bible prophecy, or you may have grown up hearing verses about the end of this age, about wars, rumors of wars, pestilences, earthquakes in diverse places, about perilous times when men would be despisers of those that are good, lovers of pleasure more than lovers of God, having a form of godliness, but denying the power thereof. Many of you learned from pulpits decades ago the things that professional futurists are only now beginning to understand. You heard about coming technology that would allow a small cadre of men to rule the world at a minute level, even to the point of being able to determine who could or could not buy even a cup of coffee. Such technology now exists. We've got wars, and boy, do we have rumors of war. Russia is a nation with at least 10,000 nuclear warheads, and their leader, Vladimir Putin, seems to have stopped caring what the rest of the world thinks. He seems to think it no longer matters. Even with all the heat he's taking over shooting down the Malaysian airliner, and with more sanctions threatened by the United States and Europe, he still has his soldiers actively firing on Ukraine from Russia. What does the world do if a nation with 10,000 nukes goes rogue? Time magazine called it Cold War II and suggested we're losing. There's the Russian war against Ukraine, that we can see, but behind that lurks a rumor of war, nuclear war, war on a scale never seen before in the history of the world. And that's just one hot spot. The P5+1 countries, led by the United States, recently extended Iran's deadline for a negotiated resolution regarding its nuclear program. A few days later, Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, announced his solution for the Gaza crisis. He said, "Israel's annihilation is the only real cure." Judging by the present agreement with Iran, it looks as if their quest for a nuclear bomb will continue uncontested, at least by the P5+1 nations. It's interesting that the extension lasts until just after the midterm elections in the U.S. North Korea is rattling its saber again. Kim Jong-un is proving to be an even less stable leader than his father. And North Korea rattles a very real saber. They have atomic weapons and missiles that can carry them throughout much of Asia, including Japan and South Korea, maybe even Hawaii. There have always been wars and rumors of wars, but as the nuclear club expands, the danger to the world is expanding geometrically. The world has never been in such a peril as it is now, with the most unstable leaders and regimes gaining possession of deliverable nuclear weapons. Bible prophecy predicts in Revelation chapter 9 and 16 that the kings of the East, led, we believe now, by China, will suddenly wipe out a third of the Earth's population once war breaks out in the Middle East during the tribulation. This war will be provoked when Gog from the land of Magog, or Russia, spoken of in Ezekiel chapter 38 and 39, will lead a Muslim coalition headed by Iran into an assault upon Israel and the Middle East. I've been warning of this series of catastrophic events and its players for over 55 years. Now the exact conditions are clearly before us. We can even see why the various powers will have reason to attack. Jesus also said there would be famines. The world now lives on the brink of food shortages and catastrophes that could come from any one of several looming problems. But even without such catastrophes, just in the normal course of events, 1 billion people in the world go to bed hungry every night. Jesus said to look for an increase in earthquakes, and he specifically said, in diverse places. Earthquake maps of the United States and several other countries have changed dramatically, with strong earthquakes occurring in places where only 5 years ago no one ever remembered feeling one. Diverse places. Jesus said all of this would be merely the beginning of birth pangs. Folks, let there be no doubt. The water has broken. Labor has begun. Contractions are now strong and close. The birth is near. The world's a mess, but there is a new world coming. The Bible gives scores of specific conditions for the approach of the last days, and they're here. But the great theme of the last days prophecy has always centered on the nation of Israel and a relatively small parcel of ground known as Jerusalem. And the most strategic piece of real estate on earth is the 35 acres in Jerusalem on which Israel's Temple Mount was originally built. God predicted 3,000 years ago that Israel would rebel against him, be driven from their sacred land, and dispersed throughout the world. He also said that near the end, he would bring them back to their land, and he would bring Jerusalem back under their control. The Jews returned as a nation in 1948, and against all odds became a nation. And then Jerusalem came under their control in 1967, in direct fulfillment of prophecy. Psalm 2 asks, why do the nations rage and the people plot a vain thing? Satan seems determined to make God a liar by destroying Israel, and so the heathen rage. They rage against Israel, against Israel's control of Jerusalem, and worst of all, against the God of the entire universe. It's important to note that Israel's present battle with Hamas is different from those they've fought before. And it's not just that the weapons on both sides are more sophisticated and dangerous. This time, there's a different attitude among the Israelis. 80% of them support the incursion into Gaza, and 71% say Israel should expand its operation to eliminate further threats from Hamas. when the Israeli Security Cabinet rebuffed U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry's ceasefire proposal last week. Even dovish politicians like Tzipi Livni joined in the unanimous rejection. I think what's different this time is that Israelis are fed up with hypocrisy, and they know their survival is at stake. Hamas strikes Israel with terrorist weapons, then hides those weapons in civilian neighborhoods while claiming to care about those civilians. That's the height of hypocrisy. The nations of the world condemn Israel for basic acts of self-defense, acts that are amazingly restrained. Virtually the whole world refuses to acknowledge Israel's unprecedented attempts to limit civilian casualties, even though these attempts put their own soldiers at greater risk. There is no record in history of any nation using such restraint when it is under attack by enemies sworn to annihilate it. Instead, condemnation comes to Israel for doing what any other country would do in similar circumstances. That's unprecedented hypocrisy. Israelis have experienced this treatment for years, and they're fed up. They know the history. They know how much they've sacrificed for a peace that seems more remote now than before they made those sacrifices. They know how hard they've tried, and they know they're not Nazis. Nowadays, that's the word that keeps popping up regarding Israel. Jews are being equated with Nazis. It started in 1967 in the bowels of Pravda, the old Soviet propaganda machine, and it hasn't stopped. Turkey's Prime Minister Recep Erdogan criticized the invasion of Gaza with these words: "Those who condemn Hitler day and night have surpassed Hitler in barbarism." Former Pink Floyd singer Roger Waters, a longtime critic of Israel, recently told Counterpunch magazine, "The situation in Israel-Palestine with the occupation, the ethnic cleansing, and the systematic racist apartheid Israeli regime is unacceptable." Look at all those buzzwords and false comparisons. Occupation? What occupation? Israel removed its people from Gaza, including soldiers, back in 2005. Ethnic cleansing? That's a phrase meaning either the expulsion or genocide of an entire people. Israel expelled all Jews, their own citizens, from Gaza, not Palestinians. He went on to say, there were many people that pretended that the oppression of the Jews was not going on from 1933 until 1946. So this is not a new scenario, except that this time it's the Palestinian people being murdered. Think about it rationally. The Nazis rounded up all the Jews they could find. They used them for unspeakable medical experiments. They threw them out of their own homes, stole all their possessions, and sent them to concentration camps, where they were gassed by the hundreds of thousands, and they threw their bodies into ovens. They lined Jews up in front of open pits so they could shoot them and bury them more efficiently. They murdered Jews, and they did it 6 million times. No one in his right mind can think that what is happening in Gaza is anything like what I just described, which raises an interesting question. Why do people believe it? Can Erdogan be sane and accuse Israel of surpassing the barbarism of Adolf Hitler? It is demonically inspired spiritual darkness. It's very real, extremely dangerous, and exactly what the prophets foretold. I'll be right back.